We're now going to shift gears a little, and next on our agenda is a discussion about fighting financial crime, featuring three of our BIS Innovation Hub center heads. Maha El Dimachki, head of the Singapore Center, Francesca Hopwood Road, head of the London Center, and joining us remotely will be Beju Shah, head of the Toronto Center. So Maha, Francesca, and Beju will be speaking about three BIS Innovation Hub projects that cover fresh approaches to fight financial crime, Project Aurora, Hertha, and Mandala, as well as what comes next with regard to future projects in this area. So with that, thank you, and over to you, Maha and Francesca.
Thank you very much indeed for that such a lovely introduction. And I'm going to kind of slightly tweak kind of the moderator, and we've agreed that I'll be the navigator for today's session with my colleagues Maha and Beju, who's joining us from Toronto. So as we've just heard, today's session, we will really be examining the critical work, collaboration, and yes, we're going to use this word again because it is so vital. The role collaboration plays in combating financial crime. We didn't set it up, but the reflections from the previous panel that we had from Eno and from Andrew and others around the way that AI is both helping us to tackle financial crime, but also the way that AI is also enabling fraud and the proliferation, I think really underscores the important discussion that we're going to have today. So I don't think we need to remind ourselves about the importance of tackling financial crime and why it is so critical for us as central banks and financial authorities around the world. It is critical, and it also remains incredibly challenging. We know the figures, I think, but it's important to remind ourselves that, for example, in 2023, $3.1 trillion was laundered and used for terrorist financing. Within the financial system, banks have faced projected losses of $442 billion due to fraud. And we know, in line with this, regulatory requirements keep building year on year. So we can see that the challenge is significant, and it is one that we've been examining in the hub through a suite of projects, all tackling different elements of the problem, and in partnership with organizations across the ecosystem, and that's something we really want to touch on in the second half of the discussion today. And what we really seek to do is we want to examine some of the insights from this approach, but we also want to share with you what we have found from connecting the insights from our projects to enhance their value and the outcomes and effectiveness in financial crime mitigation strategies. The projects across the hub, Aurora, Hertha, Mandala, Raven, Polaris, we will test you at the end. We expect you to know them like this. All seek to address challenges at different points in the life cycle. And they all crucially hold in balance this need for privacy with the importance of identifying illicit transactions and keeping the integrity of the system safe and secure. So we really see our projects coming together in a stack, tackling pre-validation and compliance, enhanced transaction monitoring, building collaborative transaction analytics, and protecting against cyber threats, all things that we have heard a drumbeat across discussions already. So I am delighted because I get to spend time with Maha and with Beju in talking with you about how these projects fit together, what our experience has been of collaborating across the hub, but also crucially across the ecosystem. We know this is a complex landscape. We know it takes and it involves many players, and we can bring that to life for you, but also where we see our work developing. So perhaps because I have the floor as our navigator, I can start with sharing some key learnings from our work on Project Hertha. I spoke just now about this importance of privacy and the really careful balancing act between efficiency, customer convenience, cost. And we believe, as we've heard already, that advanced technologies, whether it's AI, whether it's network analytics, underpinned with capabilities like synthetic data, for example, can help us understand these trade-offs. So Hertha focused very much on the role of electronic payment systems. And you might ask yourself why, and because they really have an opportunity to help combat financial crime, because they aggregate network data across many financial institutions. And they can really, in their role in processing transactions, they can really spot those network patterns and the relationships between entities. And so in Hertha, what we wanted to do was answer a couple of really important questions. How effective can you be when you are only drawing on network patterns rather than private data? How do you best safeguard privacy of legitimate users of financial services? And how can you start to anticipate and best anticipate new financial crime behaviours that have not previously been identified? And this, I think, really picks up something that you were saying, which was with the pace of change and how quickly the environment is moving. It's not just enough to know what we know now, it's about identifying what might be coming down the track. And so there's a couple of projects that I really want to elements of the project that I really want to draw out for you before we talk about Project Mandala. And the foundation of our project was a really robust synthetic data set. And this kind of served as a sandbox, an engine for our experimentation, if you like. It was really very significant in scale with 1.8 million simulated accounts and just over 300 million transactions. And what we did was we modeled 2,000 financial crime schemas representing 10 distinct typologies with various behaviors built in. We didn't do that kind of with cold towels on our heads, kind of thinking deep thoughts about it. We really worked with a network of experts across the ecosystem. And we did that very intentionally throughout the project to really build that understanding and sense check it and validate it. And what we found was that actually payment system analytics can really help banks and PSPs spot illicit activity and can be a really valuable supplementary tool. And we found that it can increase system-wide detection, but it's also, and this was something that I think is incredibly important to underscore, it was particularly valuable for spotting novel behaviours from illicit actors. And it really it enabled a 26% increase over banks working in isolation. And if you remember, we've talked about privacy, or I've talked about privacy a couple of times already. These results were achieved using a minimal number of data points. So really putting kind of privacy at the heart of what we were seeking to achieve. So there, as you can see kind of from the slide that's behind me, is where Hertha sits in kind of in our emergent sort of technology stack. But Maha, what about Mandala?
So, I mean, I think you mentioned already how we look at how our projects come together. I mean, when we started off, I think it feels like they were all sort of projects in isolation. And, you know, what Hertha was tackling was different to what Mandala was tackling. I mean, Mandala's more of a compliance related project that streamlines and automates compliance checks. But it was interesting how when we started to think, we would talk to each other and talk about this kind of landscape of fighting financial crime, where one solution isn't going to solve the problem and we have to have a whole of ecosystem approach. That's how we started to see how our projects come together. So Mandala looks at the compliance requirements of, and we looked at cross-border transactions in particular. Can we look at sort of a pre-validation and sort of a pre-validation phase of conducting the compliance checks, creating a verifiable proof of the compliance, and allowing that to travel with the transaction? And what could be sort of the possibilities of kind of streamlining and making compliance checks more efficient? Because the things that we hear from everybody, industry, regulators, everybody, is that compliance creates real friction in the in payments. And so, rather than trying to, we're an innovation lab, we're a technology shop. We don't necessarily, we're not really looking at how do we change policy. And how do we change standards? What we're trying to do is, given the policies and standards that we have, is there a way in which this can be more efficient? And that's what Mandala was trying to test. So pre-validation, then we look at that verifiable proof. We tested it with kind of digital assets, as well as with, we partnered with Swift, for Swift messages, creates a hash, travels across the transaction flow. And it did show that it can create these efficiencies. So the signs of, and we had two use cases, sanction screening and capital flow management measures. And the signs of those use cases showed that it can actually create efficiencies. It also helps the central banks in terms of their monitoring process, so they can automatically monitor these transactions. So it's helpful to central banks, it's helpful to commercial banks and those who need to conduct the compliance. And that was important for Mandela, because when we talk about public-private partnership, it was very much about ensuring that public-private partnership was part of the project. Those users who need to do the compliance and those who need to monitor compliance or conduct their, let's say, supervisory activities. And so now where we are is actually taking it to the next phase. So Mandela is now going into Mandela phase 2, which is where we're going to test further whether what we've observed in the first phase is actually, does it still hold in larger sort of transaction sets. And so we're setting that up. The team are here actually next to the Mandela poster. You could talk to them and find out more about that project. We're also looking at whether we can broaden the use cases for Mandela, because it was very much around more of the quantitative type of compliance, sanction screening against lists, etc., versus maybe some risk scoring that we can introduce or something a little bit more complex. And so, and again, using privacy-preserving technologies, and using sort of technologies available to us to see how this works. So Mandela's going to a next phase. We're very excited about that. But maybe at this stage we can finish the diagram, and I'll hand over to Beju to talk to us about Aurora.
Thank you, Maha and Francesca. Speaking about Project Aurora, financial crime is international and cross-border, and we need to think about any solutions with that lens in mind. So in the phase 1 experiment, when we combined AI, machine learning, and privacy technologies in a cross-border simulation, again using synthetic data, the detection of money laundering improved more than threefold, whilst false positives dropped by nearly 80%. And this demonstrated that smarter, secure collaboration is both possible and could be more effective. But in phase 2, that urgency for collaboration has only accelerated and become very apparent. And this is because the threat landscape around us, the cyber financial threat landscape, has changed rapidly in recent years. Cybercrime and financial crime have converged. And this is also why you see on that stack that we have our Project Polaris and Raven, which focus on cybersecurity in this financial integrity landscape. Criminal networks exploit AI, payment ecosystem fragmentation, DeFi, cryptocurrencies, and leverage professional dark web services to move illicit funds at unprecedented scale. And so in response to this, a paradigm shift is needed. We need to move from reactive rule-based compliance to collaborative, intelligence-led prevention, very much like the cybersecurity industry had to adopt years back. As part of phase 2, we conducted a global survey of 100 financial institutions and fintechs. And as one executive interviewed put it, collaboration must be the future if we're to keep pace with criminal networks that exploit the financial system. 8 in 10 respondents to this survey agreed that the sector should move towards greater collaboration, and the same number supported unified strategies for both cyber and financial crime prevention. Now, through industry workshops and roundtables, 2 themes emerged as essential to collaborative efforts, whether domestically or across borders. The first is a need for a common data language for financial crime, and the second is a need for clearer understanding of how privacy technologies can be applied to data associated to financial crime. And with this in mind, we will soon publish a data handbook, co-created with experts from these workshops. This will be a practical exemplar based around 4 use cases, such as uncovering complex ownership structures, organized crime networks, mule accounts, and also new financial crime typologies. And this exemplar can then be used and further enhanced by other collaborative initiatives. Let me pass back to Francesca now.
Thank you, Beju. And we've talked, I think, all 3 of us about kind of how we have worked with others, not just within our centres, not just maybe within our jurisdictions, but with partners, whether it's in academia and with colleagues in the private sector as well. And one of the things that we have learned is that the importance of convening for sharing that deeper insight, to foster dialogue, to understand kind of emergent use cases, understand where kind of emerging questions are are bubbling and how this can be underpinned with the value that advanced technology can bring. And we convened the Analytics Showcase earlier this year. We'll be talking about that a little bit more tomorrow afternoon. Benedict and I, in the context of how we can use these challenges. But we know that those kinds of settings are hugely valuable in creating the environments to really peel back and have a look and scrutinize kind of what we have experimented with, how we have done that experimentation. And so, Beju, I'm really kind of interested to kind of explore kind of how you understand kind of what can be achieved by integrating our efforts, because I know that's something you have been working on a lot in your previous role in the Nordics.
Sure, thank you. And I think this also formed the basis of some of the workshops that we led as part of phase 2 as well, just to really understand which initiatives, both across the public and private sector, could really make a difference in improving AML and financial crime prevention efforts. Now, not all of these rely on technology. Some of the things that came out from the survey and the workshops and also the roundtables and other events that have happened through the course of all of our work have pointed to things like joint training and knowledge sharing programs, research and data initiatives, technology experimentation, and ultimately ways to share information securely. Let me first begin talking about joint training and knowledge sharing. Public and private institutions can build critical knowledge through regular dialogue and structured public-private partnerships. And this ensures lessons are shared across the community rapidly. And this has really worked well for some countries in the Baltics. Cross-institution training can also bring regulators and practitioners together, fostering the exchange of insights across both sectors. And private institutions can collaborate to develop a shared view of risk through joint model training and related initiatives. Simulation exercises, similar to red teaming or purple teaming exercises in cybersecurity, can help test readiness against realistic scenarios, particularly addressing converged cyber and financial crime threats. Next, we have joint research and data initiatives. Complex data challenges such as tackling synthetic identities, money mule networks, and opaque ownership structures cannot be solved in isolation. Pooling expertise across public and private sector and working with a range of connected data allows us to see what no single actor can. And data handbooks provide a basis to develop a common data language of definitions, standards, and associated processes that can act as an anchor for collaborative efforts. The third, importantly, is what we do, is technology experimentation as well. It's important that innovation keeps pace with this evolving threat landscape, where threat actors are using these very advanced technologies against our institutions. Sandbox experiments with regulators involved from the start can test feasibility, identify risks, and build confidence. And our workshops really underscored the importance of regulatory involvement. Public and private collaborative pilots could test detection models in real-world conditions. And this is important because this determines potential effectiveness of new solutions, but also measures the potential operational efficiency gains. Collaborative experimentation gives us space to innovate while ensuring governance and safeguards evolve in parallel. Ultimately, information sharing and shared platforms make collaboration possible in the fight against financial crime. So clear gateways and agreed protocols give institutions the confidence to share specific information under certain conditions in a compliant and secure way. A common data language for use in information sharing ensures that a red flag raised in one institution is instantly meaningful in another. And federated pooled platforms could enable the exchange of new typologies and alerts, protecting sensitive information whilst also improving intelligence. Finally, broader initiatives, such as those linking legal entity identifiers with beneficial ownership and sanctions lists, like the ones that we saw during our analytics challenge, show how connected data can begin to turn fragmented data into collective insight. The threat landscape is only going to move faster and become more complex, and therefore collaboration and innovation are key. And that collaboration transforms our fragmented defenses into a more connected, adaptive response to AML and financial crime prevention, just as it did for the cybersecurity industry. And the path forward is not necessarily about grand leaps, but it's about steady, practical steps forward, which a collaborative environment can achieve. Thank you. I'll pass back.
You know, one of the things also that, under that theme of collaboration, is, you know, the way we operate today is that you've got your money laundering or anti-money laundering teams, you've got your CFT teams, you've got your fraud teams, all potentially operating in isolation. We hear that all the time. And I think, Beju, you talk about that, don't you? Compliance,
yeah.
You know, AML, you know, fraud prevention or mitigation or detection. These things potentially need to start to come together, because that's not how the bad actors actually operate. They operate quite nicely as a unit, take advantage and have no rules, whereas and this is the motivation, this was part of the motivation for us coming together and thinking, we need to start to think about this in a much more sort of holistic way, not just everybody coming in and playing their part, but actually drawing the lines, didn't we? I think maybe you can say a couple of words on this.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you know, in a world where these things are converged, for a threat actor, committing a fraud, washing them, carrying out cybercrime to commit fraud or a scam, or even sanctions evasion, and then washing the money is all one activity. And then, unless we're treating it the same way, we're looking at the problem through the same lens, and also bringing our teams together, or institutions bringing their cyber fraud, AML teams, sanctions teams together to work as almost one unit, you're not going to get that holistic view, that shared view of that threat landscape. And this is where our efforts around this stack come in, to signal the fact that actually there is this holistic view, and we do need to look at across all these dimensions because they are interconnected.
And I think that kind of sort of the reflections on, you know, and hopefully kind of for our audience and kind of for those sort of watching, sort of starting to see how we think about this kind of alignment of our projects, particularly in this space, is really helpful, because I sort of said slightly flippant that, you know, I test you on our project names, but understanding what each of those projects are doing and how they're coming together and where they fit and what insights can we bank for, you know, excuse the pun, from them, but then in order to build and identify, well, what's the next generation of questions we need to ask? What are the next generation of technology that we want to understand and apply? I think, you know, becomes really critically important.
Agree. And linking that then to the policy questions that are out there, to the standard setting bodies that are thinking about this. I think, you know, key partners that we talk to, you know, obviously industry, but organisations such as our FSB, the Financial Stability Board, the you know, FATF, all of these different organisations and the roles that they play, you know, bringing them together. And the Analytics Challenge was actually a really nice, I would say, environment where we had all of these key players. We ran a couple of round tables, one with you know, a mix of industry and policymakers, one just for policymakers to think about, you know, how do we move this forward, and you know, certain ideas came out of that, and different activities, and a community of and again, when we talk about collaboration, how do we form communities around a particular topic? Everybody we talk to is interested in this. Everybody we talk to tells us how this is this is something that needs to be tackled. And so how do we create communities that come together? I think the Analytics Challenge was one of those, you know, forums where, you know, again, the panels before us spoke about the platform. How do we create the platform to bring everybody together?
Indeed. So as we kind of think about kind of wrapping up, maybe, Beju, I can come to you. Do you have a wish? I know you have spent kind of the last few years deep in this space. So do you have a kind of a wish list for what combating financial crime in the future would look like?
Well, it's fair to say I've actually been down a rabbit hole. I've kind of emerged again around this, because this is a really complex landscape that just goes deeper and deeper and deeper. But ultimately, it comes back to those core things that actually this is ultimately around, in a digital world, this is around data. So we do need to, one, have a common language and a common view of what we mean in a very heterogeneous landscape, but also have the mechanisms to bring these data sets together, have this holistic view, and then collaborate all around that. I think it's the wish list is actually just to keep moving on those things, because these are a few, a handful of ideas that actually just, progressive efforts around can actually really shift the dial. So yeah, it comes back to data, privacy technologies, and collaboration and bringing that together.
Maha?
Well, I mean, I heard somebody, a colleague of mine from the MAS say, we need to use technology in a good way to fight technology for bad. And so I think technology has a role to play, exploring things like, all three of our projects looked at privacy preserving technologies. I think they're still in development. We still haven't quite worked out how do they fit in, what does that mean, what is the legal structure around these things, etc. So, for example, for Mandela, when we looked at privacy preserving techniques and how that verifiable proof can travel with the transaction, can other institutions rely on that particular proof? Is that enough? And so I think we still have a few questions around technology that we can explore. But I definitely think it plays a role in this. So that would be my one-liner, but I think it's the overall collaboration of a whole of society approach to actually tackle this in the right way would be my view. What's your view?
My view, a couple of observations I'd make. I think one of the things that was really quite interesting for us from the work we were doing in Hertha was this kind of notion that we examined around kind of collaborative active learning, which I think actually is something which we could think about kind of being applied in lots of different use cases. But what we meant about it in Hertha was how could individual institutions fuse their insights at a kind of a network level to really kind of enhance and enable and build out that picture. And I can see a few nods around the room because I know there are quite a few colleagues here who are thinking about kind of what does this mean in their jurisdictions? How do we really understand kind of and tackle kind of, the scourge of fraud and how that's growing and looking like? And so I think kind of this ability to kind of collaborate really kind of actively, I think is really profound. And then the second is around, we know that the environment is changing very rapidly around us. I mean, if we know that the pace of change is really quite profound. We know that there are different actors coming in, different scenarios playing out. And so our ability to, as you say, kind of test and harden the technology as that a landscape evolves around us, I think is going to become ever more pressing.
Yeah, I think so. Look, we're trying to demonstrate, this came naturally, but the three of us have been working together on this for quite a while, and we're trying to kind of make sure that at least we're practicing what we preach, so to speak. If we're talking about collaboration, we need to collaborate amongst each other. And what was interesting is that, Beju, you spoke about, what time is it, by the way, in Canada, Beju?
It's just after 10:30.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right then. You're okay. He's okay. I thought it was worse, because he sounded very coherent. So.
Or coffee.
Or coffee, exactly. So Beju went down the rabbit hole, but we all learned from that, because the sharing that he gave us, what Hertha gave us, for example, in terms of privacy preserving technologies and some of the the models that were used in Hertha, we're building on these to do the next thing, and so I mean we try to really, play our part in this ecosystem, if you like. We try to, look at how can we be helpful to central banks, to regulators that really care about this by looking at this public-private partnership sort of, platform that we can bring together. How can we use technology or experiment with technology to close some of these gaps or maybe answer some of these questions, some perhaps more advanced than others in terms of the nature of the work that we do or the projects that we do. And so we will continue to do that because obviously that's our role in the hub, that's our role at the BIS. And already we're thinking about, Beju again mentioned this idea about data and data sharing. Again, we hear a lot that is one of the key issues that is holding us back when it comes to fighting financial crime or fraud, right? And so we're looking actually as a next idea of a project which came out of the analytics challenge and those round tables that we spoke about, is to, maybe there's kind of a platform where we can create a protocol, we can share not necessarily the underlying data, but fraud typologies. And maybe we can train a model collectively to see whether that kind of global model can actually perform better than perhaps the local initiatives that are happening. It's still in formation, but that's an idea that's becoming a bit more concrete. And so that's how we're trying to build on what, and we're taking inspiration actually from Hertha, from what Aurora has been doing, not duplicating efforts, but building on it. And so we want that to be our role, but we want it to be a role that connects into the ecosystem, helps the policymakers, industry, etc., to think about these things. And we'd be very keen to actually hear more from all of you throughout the break. On that note, maybe rather than handing back to you, I'll wrap up to say we've got our posters out there. There's loads of them. Our teams are also standing around them, ready to showcase. So please, if you've got any questions around any of these projects or anything at all, in the break, maybe you can go and we can have a conversation. With that, Stephanie, I'll hand over to you.